sky was golden when the first scream tore through the quiet lakeside. A thick column of black smoke rose high above the turquoise blue lake, twisting in the breeze like a warning to the heavens. People rushed from their cabins, their weekend peace shattered by the sound of crackling fire and the echo of panic. On the shore, a woman in a bright pink suit stood frozen, her eyes wide with horror. The reflection of the flames flickered across her face, painting her fear in red and orange. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "That's our boat." A few feet away, a man, mid-30s, strong build, dark hair, grabbed a fire extinguisher from the sand but stopped halfway toward the dock. The flames were too high. The wooden sailboat was completely engulfed, every inch of it hissing, burning, screaming. A firefighter shouted, "Everyone, get back!" He pointed the yellow hose toward the lake. Water spraying in a powerful stream that hissed as it hit the flames. Steam rose up in thick clouds, blurring everything, the fire, the people, the truth. The woman took a shaky step forward. "My husband is still out there. He was fixing the sails. He's on that boat." The firefighter turned, eyes sharp. "Ma'am, you need to stay back." But she didn't. She ran. The man in the blue shirt grabbed her arm before she reached the dock. "Lara, stop! You'll get yourself killed!" She twisted, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Ethan, he's out there!" The name hit Ethan like a wave of cold water. Her husband. Not their husband, but her husband. He looked at her, this woman he had once loved, maybe still did, and saw the pain in her eyes. The same pain that had brought them back to this lake after 5 long years apart. "Lara," he said softly, his voice breaking. "Please." "There's nothing you can do." The fire roared louder, as if mocking him. 10 minutes before the explosion, the lake had been perfect. The sun shimmered across the surface. The forest whispered in the wind, and the old wooden sailboat swayed gently near the dock. Lara adjusted her sunglasses and smiled. "You know, this place hasn't changed a bit." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, except now there's Wi-Fi." They both laughed. A short, awkward laugh, the kind that comes from two people who used to know each other too well and now don't know what to say. "Do you ever think about that summer?" Lara asked quietly. Ethan looked toward the lake. "Every damn day." The words hung in the air like smoke before a storm. She turned to face him. "You shouldn't still blame yourself." "It wasn't your fault, Ethan." He looked at her, jaw tight. "I was driving the boat. It was my fault." Her voice softened. "And I was the one who told you to go faster." We both lost him that night. The silence that followed was heavy. The sound of water lapping against the dock was the only thing that dared to move between them. Then a shout came from the boat. "Hey, can one of you bring me the wrench?" It was Mark, Lara's husband. He was on deck fixing something near the mast. His sleeves were rolled up, his hair messy, and there was a faint smile on his face. Ethan handed Lara the wrench. "Here, you should probably take it." She nodded, avoiding his eyes, and walked down the dock. The wooden planks creaked under her heels. She handed the wrench up to Mark and smiled. "You sure you know what you're doing?" "Relax, babe," Mark said, laughing. "It's just a loose valve." "I've got it." But Ethan noticed something else, the smell, a faint metallic scent mixed with gasoline. He frowned, scanning the dock. "You smell that?" Lara turned. "What?" "Fuel, it's leaking from somewhere." Before she could answer, a drop of oil fell into the water, spreading a shimmering rainbow across the surface. Ethan called out, "Mark, shut the engine off! You've got a leak!" Mark turned, confused. "What leak?" And then, boom! The sound ripped through the air, louder than thunder. The entire sailboat shook, a burst of orange flame erupting from below deck. Lara screamed as the blast threw her backward into the water. Ethan dove in after her, his arms slicing through the freezing lake. Lara, where are you?" She surfaced, coughing, gasping. "Mark, he's still on the boat." The fire spread fast, crawling up the mast, devouring the sails. Pieces of burning wood began to fall into the water around them. Ethan grabbed her arm. "We have to get to shore!" She fought him, her voice breaking. "He's alive! He has to be." But the next explosion silenced everything. Now the firefighters were fighting a losing battle. The lake hissed, steam rolled across the shore, and everyone stood watching the inferno consume what was left of the sailboat. Ethan wrapped a towel around Lara's shoulders, but she barely felt it. Her eyes were locked on the burning wreckage. "I should have been there," she whispered. "He called for help and I ran." Ethan shook his head. "You didn't run. You survived." She looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes. "That's not the same thing." The firefighter approached. "We've got a problem. The flames are too strong. There might be another gas tank on board. We need everyone to move back another 50 feet. Lara's breath hitched. "Another explosion?" Ethan stepped closer to the firefighter. "Is there any chance someone's still alive on that boat?" The man hesitated, looking toward the fire. "No, not anymore." Lara broke down. Her body collapsed against Ethan's chest, her sobs lost in the sound of burning wood and roaring flames. He held her tightly, but his eyes were distant. Something about this didn't feel right. Mark had been fixing the fuel line, but that explosion, it wasn't normal. Too fast, too sudden. Ethan's thoughts raced. Could it have been intentional? He looked toward the burning wreckage, and for just a moment, through the heat and smoke, he thought he saw movement. A shadow on the deck, a figure. He blinked and it was gone. As the last of the fire began to die, the lake fell silent again. The firefighters stepped back, the crowd began to thin, and the sun dipped lower behind the trees. Lara sat on the dock, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the blackened remains of the sailboat. Ethan stood a few feet away, talking quietly to the police officer. "The explosion came from below deck," the officer said. "We'll need to investigate what caused it." "You said he was working on the fuel system?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, but Mark knew what he was doing. He wouldn't make a mistake like that." The officer raised an eyebrow. "You think it wasn't an accident?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't know, but someone wanted that boat to burn." He turned to look at Lara, broken, trembling, lost, and something inside him shifted. He had left this lake years ago trying to escape the past. But now the past was burning right in front of him. The reflection of the dying fire glowed in his eyes as he whispered, "This isn't over. To be continued, if you want to know what really happened on that lake. If Mark's death was an accident, or something much darker." The next morning, the lake was silent. The smell of burned wood and fuel still lingered in the cold air, drifting across the water like ghosts that refused to leave. Lara sat alone on the dock, her hair tangled, her eyes hollow. The once bright pink suit she wore was now smeared with ash and soot. The lake that used to bring her peace now felt like an open grave. Behind her, Ethan walked toward the waterline. He had barely slept. The image of the burning boat kept replaying in his mind. The explosion, the fire, the screams, and that shadow he thought he saw moving through the smoke. He wasn't sure if it had been real, or if guilt was finally driving him insane. A voice broke the silence. "You came back, huh?" Ethan turned. It was Sheriff Daniels, a heavy-set man in his 50s, wearing a tan uniform and a tired expression. "Morning, Sheriff," Ethan said quietly. "Morning? Feels more like hell broke loose last night." The sheriff sighed, glancing at the wreckage still half submerged in the lake. "We pulled out what's left of the hull this morning. Nothing but charcoal and twisted metal?" Lara turned her head slowly, her voice soft but trembling. "Did you find him?" The sheriff hesitated before answering. "We found something. We're not sure yet. Forensics will take it from here." Her face went pale. She clutched her arms tightly as if trying to keep herself from falling apart. Ethan stepped closer. "Sheriff, I told one of your guys that explosion didn't seem accidental." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "You think someone did this on purpose?" "Yes," Ethan said firmly. Mark was fixing the fuel line. He knew what he was doing. That kind of explosion doesn't happen just because of a leak. The sheriff rubbed his chin. "You used to work in marine repairs, right? Back when your dad ran the docks?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know boats. I know fuel systems. Something doesn't add up." Daniels sighed. "All right, I'll keep that in mind. But don't go playing detective, Ethan. Let us do our job." As he turned away, Ethan muttered under his breath, "I can't promise that." Later that day at the cabin was quiet except for the ticking of a wall clock. Lara sat on the couch, staring at the old photo album on the coffee table. Her fingers traced over a picture of her and Mark, smiling on the same boat that was now ashes. Ethan stood by the window, looking out toward the lake. His mind was spinning. Every instinct told him this wasn't over. He finally spoke. Do you remember anyone acting strange yesterday? Before the fire? Lara shook her head. No, I don't think so. Mark was in a good mood. He'd been talking about taking the boat out again, just the three of us. He said he wanted to make things right. Ethan frowned. Make things right? What did he mean by that? She looked up. I don't know. He never got the chance to explain. A loud knock broke the tension. Ethan opened the door. It was a delivery man holding a small brown package. Delivery for Mark Dalton, the man said. Ethan blinked. Mark? But he's... The delivery man shrugged. It was ordered 2 days ago. Must have been online. He handed it over and left. Lara's hands trembled as she took the package. She stared at it like it was a message from the dead. Open it, Ethan said softly. She slowly tore the tape. Inside was a black flash drive and a note written in Mark's handwriting. If something happens to me, don't trust anyone. Especially not the people from the marina. Lara gasped. What the hell? Ethan grabbed the note, scanning it twice. The marina? That's where he bought the fuel tanks, right? She nodded slowly. Yes, from a man named Cole. He handled all the maintenance stuff. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Cole Granger? He's still running the docks. I know him. He slipped the flash drive into his jacket pocket. We're going to find out what's on this. The library was quiet, and too quiet. The hum of old computers filled the air as Ethan plugged the flash drive into one of them. Lara stood beside him, her arms crossed, eyes darting nervously toward the window. The drive opened with just one video file labeled Lakeside Truth.mp4. Ethan clicked play. The video was shaky, filmed with a phone. It showed Mark standing in a dark storage shed filled with gas canisters and mechanical parts. His voice was low, serious. If you're watching this, something went wrong. The marina's been storing illegal chemicals in old fuel tanks, and they're hiding it under our boats. I found one under ours today. Cole told me to keep quiet, but I can't. Someone needs to know. The video cut abruptly to static. Lara covered her mouth. Oh my God. Ethan clenched his fists. He was killed for this. Just then, footsteps echoed behind them. A man's deep voice said, You two shouldn't be watching that. They turned. It was Cole Granger. He looked older than Ethan remembered, his face lined and hard. His shirt smelled faintly of fuel. Ethan stood up tense. Cole, what are you doing here? Cole smirked. Same as you. Looking for answers. Lara took a step back. You knew, didn't you? You knew about the chemicals. Cole's eyes flicked toward the flash drive. You shouldn't have that. Hand it over. Ethan shook his head. Not a chance. Cole's voice turned cold. You don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't just about fuel. Ethan, you're messing with something way bigger than you. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then maybe you should start explaining. But before Cole could speak, a loud crash came from outside, the sound of breaking glass, followed by the sharp crack of gunfire. Down! Ethan shouted, pulling Lara to the floor as bullets tore through the window. Glass scattered across the floor. Lara screamed, covering her head. Cole dove behind a table. Ethan crawled toward the corner, heart pounding. Who the hell is shooting at us? Cole yelled back. You wanted answers? There's your answer. They ran out the back door of the library, sprinting through the alley as sirens wailed in the distance. Ethan led the way toward his truck. Lara clutched his arm. What's happening? He started the engine. Someone doesn't want that video getting out. Whoever Mark was investigating, they're cleaning up their mess. As they sped down the forest road, the trees blurred into streaks of green and gold. Lara's breathing was uneven, panic creeping in. Ethan, what if this is bigger than us? What if we can't stop it? He glanced at her, his voice steady but low. We don't stop until we know who killed him. The wind howled through the broken window. For a moment, it almost sounded like the whisper of flames. Nightfall, hidden cabin by the lake's edge. They stopped at an old fishing cabin. Ethan's father used to own, miles away from the main road. The place smelled like dust and pine, untouched for years. Lara sat by the small fireplace, staring into the flames. Do you think Cole set the fire? Ethan shook his head. No, he's scared too. Whoever's behind this, they're still out there. He pulled out the flash drive again, staring at it. There's got to be more. Maybe hidden files. He plugged it into his laptop. A new folder appeared, encrypted, but one file had a name, Project Ember. Project Ember? Lara repeated. That sounds military. Ethan's brows furrowed. Or experimental. Before they could open it, headlights flashed outside the window. Lara gasped. Someone's here. Ethan quickly shut the laptop and grabbed a flashlight. The light from the vehicle cut through the darkness, then disappeared. He whispered, "Stay here." He stepped outside slowly, the forest whispering around him. The gravel crunched under his boots as he moved toward the trees. "Who's there?" he called out. No answer. Just the soft sound of waves against the shore. He turned back toward the cabin and froze. The front door was wide open. "Lara!" he shouted. "Lara!" He ran inside. The fireplace was still burning, but she was gone. On the floor lay her scarf and a single black glove that didn't belong to her. Ethan picked it up. Inside the glove was a small metal tag engraved with one word, Ember. Ethan stood there, heart pounding, the flames reflecting in his eyes once again. The word on the tag shimmered like a warning, Ember. Whatever Project Ember was, it had already taken Mark. And now they had taken Lara. He whispered to himself, voice shaking but determined. "You burned my past. You won't burn my future." He grabbed the flash drive, stepped outside into the dark forest, and looked out at the lake, the same lake where it all began. The wind carried the smell of smoke again, faint but real. Somewhere out there the truth was waiting, and Ethan was going to find it, no matter what it cost. The forest was silent, but the silence felt wrong. Ethan moved through the darkness with nothing but a flashlight and the steady sound of his heartbeat, pounding in his ears. Lara was gone. The only thing left was her scarf and that black glove marked Ember. The word wouldn't stop echoing in his mind. Project Ember. Whatever it was, it had burned his boat, killed Mark, and now it had taken her. The wind blew across the lake, carrying the faint smell of gasoline and smoke. For a second, Ethan thought he heard her voice, soft, distant, calling his name from across the water. He whispered into the night, "Hold on, Lara, I'm coming." He climbed into his truck and turned the key. The headlights cut through the mist, landing on something strange, fresh tire tracks leading away from the cabin road. He followed them. After half an hour of driving, the tracks ended at an old chain-link fence. Beyond it stood a cluster of metal buildings, rusted, silent, and surrounded by the woods. A faded sign read, U.S. Environmental Research Center, closed since 2005. Ethan's breath fogged in the cold air. "This has to be it," he muttered. He slipped through a gap in the fence and crouched low, his flashlight beam bouncing off broken windows and overgrown grass. The place looked abandoned, but then, from one of the buildings, he saw a faint orange glow, light. He crept closer, staying low behind barrels and concrete walls. Through a window, he saw two figures. One of them was Cole Granger. The other was a man in a dark suit. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, gray hair slicked back. They were arguing. Cole's voice was low but angry. "You told me no one would get hurt." The man in the suit replied calmly, "Collateral damage. Mr. Granger, we couldn't risk the evidence being discovered." Ethan's jaw tightened. Evidence. They were talking about the boat. Then Cole slammed his fist on the table. "You killed him. You killed Mark." The man didn't flinch. Mark Dalton was going on his lips. "You can't stop it. Ember lives on. You think this is just about one lake? It's global now. Whole shipments are already out there." Ethan stared. "Then I'll burn it down, all of it." He slammed the man's head into the wall, knocking him unconscious. Alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed across the corridor. Ethan grabbed Lara's hand. "Come on, we have to go now!" They ran down the hall, dodging sparks and falling debris. Flames began to spread. The leaking gas had caught fire. Lara coughed, covering her mouth. "We're not going to make it." "Yes, we are," Ethan shouted. "Follow me." They burst through a side door just as an explosion tore through the lower level, shaking the ground beneath them. The blast sent them flying into the dirt outside. The facility erupted into a wall of orange and black smoke. Ethan pulled Lara to her feet. "Run!" They stumbled through the forest, the night lit behind them by the burning inferno. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance. Sheriff Daniels. Voice calling out through a loudspeaker. "Ethan, Lara, this way!" They made it to the clearing where police cars were gathering. Daniels grabbed Ethan's shoulder. "You two are lucky to be alive." Ethan nodded, breathless. "We found them, Sheriff. They killed Mark, and they're part of something much bigger. A project called Ember." Daniels frowned. "We found the building's records. Looks like a shell company under the name. Helios Energy Group. We'll dig deeper." Ethan looked back toward the fire, his eyes reflecting the flames. "Make sure it never happens again." The lake was quiet again. The wreckage of the old sailboat had been cleared away. The sun shimmered across the calm, blue water. Peaceful, almost pretending that nothing had happened. Lara stood on the dock, watching the ripples. She wore a simple white sweater now, her hair loose, her face softer but still haunted. Ethan walked up behind her. "They say the investigation will take months. Government's all over it now." She nodded slowly. Mark would have wanted that. He wanted the truth to come out. Ethan looked down at the water. "You know, I used to hate this lake. Every time I looked at it, I saw what I lost. But now..." She turned to him. "Now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I see what survived." For a long moment, they just stood there side by side, watching the sun dip low over the trees. A single ember from the campfire drifted into the air, glowing softly before fading into the wind. Final twist, epilogue scene. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, in a clean corporate office overlooking the city, a man in a dark suit sat at a desk. His phone buzzed. He answered calmly. "Yes?" A voice on the other end said, "The facility burned down. Everyone thinks it's over." The man smiled. "Good, let them think that. Move to phase 2. He hung up and turned his computer screen. A file opened with the title, Project Ember, Global Distribution Status, Active, on his lips. "You can't stop it. Ember lives on. You think this is just about one lake? It's global now. Whole shipments are already out there." Ethan stared. "Then I'll burn it down, all of it." He slammed the man's head into the wall, knocking him unconscious. Alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed across the corridor. Ethan grabbed Lara's hand. "Come on, we have to go now!" They ran down the hall, dodging sparks and falling debris. Flames began to spread. The leaking gas had caught fire. Lara coughed, covering her mouth. "We're not going to make it." "Yes, we are," Ethan shouted. "Follow me." They burst through a side door just as an explosion tore through the lower level, shaking the ground beneath them. The blast sent them flying into the dirt outside. The facility erupted into a wall of orange and black smoke. Ethan pulled Lara to her feet. "Run!" They stumbled through the forest, the night lit behind them by the burning inferno. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance. Sheriff Daniels. Voice calling out through a loudspeaker. "Ethan, Lara, this way!" They made it to the clearing where police cars were gathering. Daniels grabbed Ethan's shoulder. "You two are lucky to be alive." Ethan nodded, breathless. "We found them, Sheriff. They killed Mark, and they're part of something much bigger. A project called Ember." Daniels frowned. "We found the building's records. Looks like a shell company under the name. Helios Energy Group. We'll dig deeper." Ethan looked back toward the fire, his eyes reflecting the flames. "Make sure it never happens again." The lake was quiet again. The wreckage of the old sailboat had been cleared away. The sun shimmered across the calm, blue water. Peaceful, almost pretending that nothing had happened. Lara stood on the dock, watching the ripples. She wore a simple white sweater now, her hair loose, her face softer but still haunted. Ethan walked up behind her. "They say the investigation will take months. Government's all over it now." She nodded slowly. Mark would have wanted that. He wanted the truth to come out. Ethan looked down at the water. "You know, I used to hate this lake. Every time I looked at it, I saw what I lost. But now..." She turned to him. "Now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I see what survived." For a long moment, they just stood there side by side, watching the sun dip low over the trees. A single ember from the campfire drifted into the air, glowing softly before fading into the wind. Final twist, epilogue scene. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, in a clean corporate office overlooking the city, a man in a dark suit sat at a desk. His phone buzzed. He answered calmly. "Yes?" A voice on the other end said, "The facility burned down. Everyone thinks it's over." The man smiled. "Good, let them think that. Move to phase 2. He hung up and turned his computer screen. A file opened with the title, Project Ember, Global Distribution Status, Active. The man sipped his coffee, eyes cold. "Let it burn," he whispered. And that's how it ends. Or maybe how it begins. The fire at Blue Lake was never just an accident. It was a warning. If you want to know how far Project Ember will spread, if you want to see what happens when truth fights power,